was based on that limited experience. Whereas in India's case, it's a nation of millennia, it's a civilization of millennia old history. That evolution of the civilization over millennia, when we talk about cultural identity of this nation, it is based on that millennia old common culture and value system. Based on that experience, we form the cultural identity of our nation. Radha Kumud Mukherjee, in his famous book, The Fundamental Unity of India, emphasizes this point. He states, I'm quoting, a keen, penetrating insight can hardly fail to recognize that beneath all this manifold variety, there is a fundamental unity. That this diversity itself, far from being a source of weakness, is a fertile source of strength and wealth. Unquote. Radha Kumud Mukherjee quotes William Smith to buttress his point. Smith, speaking from his long experience of India, says, I quote, the civilization of India has many features which differentiate it from that of all other regions of the world. While they are common to the whole country, or rather continent in a degree sufficient to justify its treatment as a unit in the history of human social and intellectual development. Unquote. Friends, each nation has its own identity, denying of which by its own people will be a sure way of its decline and its suicide. India's core identity does not lie in its political ideologies and programs. Swami Vivekananda. In fact, this month is important in remembering Swami Vivekananda because about 117 years ago, 127 years ago rather, in this month, he delivered his famous lecture at the World Parliament of Religions at Chicago in 1893. He makes a very important statement in one of his speeches. He describes India as a Dharma Prana Bharata. That beautiful phrase, denoting the soul of this country as Dharma, is an important marker of our national identity, Dharma. And that is the soul of this national identity, this national life. A rank materialist like Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. He also, on one occasion, Dr. Sampurnananda, an eminent Congress leader from Uttar Pradesh, he hosted a long discussion of eminent scholars in 1957 to discuss the question of future direction of India. Jawaharlal Nehru, whom generally we all see as a very materialist, socialist, influenced by European thought, somebody who was disconnected from India's roots, even he makes a very important speech. He says in that session, I'm quoting Nehru, in our craze for material development, we have completely neglected the spiritual aspect of our life. Human life has a purpose, an ultimate goal. We need to revive a philosophy of life with its spiritual base for which a man should be prepared to live and to lay down his life if necessary. We speak of a welfare state and advocate socialism and democracy, yet we do not have a clear and unequivocal definition of either. Democracy and socialism are merely the means, not the end. While thinking of our economic problems, the goal of life, as has been laid down in Vedanta, on the foundation of which the entire creation rests, must be ever present before us. This was Pandit Nehru, advocating for more than political creed of socialism and democracy, for us to meet the ends, and his conclusion was that Vedanta provides that. So this cultural identity, civilization based on civilizational experience, has always been at the core of Indian understanding of our national identity. When I say cultural identity, it should not be mistaken for religious beliefs. Tocqueville attributed the working of the American political system to American culture. He described it as congenial to democracy. Max Weber went one step further and declared that the rise of capitalism in the West was essentially a cultural phenomenon. So similarly, in India, the rise of India's political culture, even the kind of democracy we practice in India, is based on the experience of our cultural past. It is the cultural continuum that evolves in various forms in our country. When India became independent, an important question was put to Mahatma Gandhi. He was asked, what kind of political system you want for India, for independent India? His instant response was Ram Rajya. Then people asked him, what do you mean by it? Do you mean India should become a theocracy, a religious state? Gandhi says no. My definition of Ram Rajya, my understanding of Ram Rajya is that of a Dharma Rajya, where Dharma is the people-centric value system. Dharmo dharayati prajaha. So a Dharma Rajya is a people-centric statecraft, people-centric political value system. This was the clear understanding of our leaders right until the time of independence. Of course, on this question, during the British period, a lot of confusion was also created. We must understand the roots of confusion in India that are in the British time, British period. Otherwise, people like Gandhi never had any confusion over it. But this confusion was there in the minds of some people. Like, some British scholars, like Sir John Strachey, a member of the Council of State, which used to look after India's affairs in the British government. In 1988, he wrote an interesting thing about India, which many of the Indian scholars, English educated scholars of that time started believing. Strachey wrote, I quote, "This is the first and the foremost essential thing to learn about India, that there is not and never was an India or even a country of India possessing, according to European ideas, any sort of unity, physical, political, social, or religious. No Indian nation, no people of India of which we hear so much ever existed." This was John Strachey's conclusion. He said India never existed. Simon Commission, which came to India in 1928, described India as a conglomeration of races and religions. No, this understanding of India of the Europeans was actually based on the European experience of nation and nationhood. But unfortunately, in India, there were some scholars who started accepting that theory. The foremost was one of the founding members of the Congress, Surendranath Banerjee. He authored a book titled A Nation in the Making. He wrote in that book that India, he also probably believed in John Strachey. He believed that India was never a nation. So the British, and through the process of bringing new European ideals, we are trying to build an Indian nation here. But luckily for us, like Gandhi, we had Indian scholars who were contesting this idea that nationalism, national identity is something we have to imbibe or we have to import from outside. Rabindranath Tagore, he was always very critical of this Western understanding of national identity. In fact, his definition of national identity, or his contrast between the way he contrasted it between the Western thinking and Indian thinking, is very critical for our understanding of national identity today. Let me quote Rabindranath Tagore. he said the civilization of the ancient Greece was nurtured in the city walls. In fact, all the modern civilizations have their cradles of brick and mortar. They were brick and mortar civilizations. They were brick and mortar nations built in the within the four walls of their kingdoms, their city states. But in India, it was in the forest that our civilization had its birth. And it took a distinct character from this origin and environment. It was surrounded by the vast life of nature and had the closest and most constant intercourse with her varying aspects. Her aim was not to acquire, but to realize, to enlarge her consciousness by growing into her surroundings. The West seems to take pride in thinking that it is the subduing of nature, as if we are living in a hostile world where we have to wrest everything we want from an unwilling and alien arrangement of things. This sentiment is the product of the city wall habit and training of the mind, the Western mind. But in India, the point of view was different. It included the world with the man as one great truth. India put all her emphasis on the harmony that exists between the individual and the universal. The fundamental unity of creation was not simply a philosophical speculation for India. It was her life object to realize this great harmony in feeling and action. This is India's national identity. It is just not a philosophical idea. It is a practicing way of life. That's what Rabindranath Tagore said. Where the Western idea of nationhood, it rose from within the city, within the four walls of their cities, their kingdoms. Here, it rose from the forest, from the nature, from the universal consciousness. Rishi Aurobindo, one of the greatest philosophers, saints of the 20th century, described Indian approach to national identity in the following terms. I quote Aurobindo. In positivism, Europe has attempted to arrive at a higher synthesis, the synthesis of humanity. And to the last of Milton was about the last man. But Aurobindo says socialism and philosophical anarchism, anarchism of Tolstoy and Spencer have even envisaged the application of the higher intellectual synthesis to life. In India, we do not recognize the nation as the highest synthesis to which one can rise. For us, the synthesis is much higher. It is humanity. Beyond that, there is a still higher synthesis, this living, suffering, aspiring world of creatures, the synthesis of Buddhism. There is a highest of all, the synthesis of God. And that is the Hindu synthesis, the synthesis of Vedanta. With us today, nationalism is our immediate practical faith and gospel, not because it is the highest possible synthesis, but because it must be realized in life if we are to have the chance of realizing the others. We must live as a nation before we can live in humanity. Aurobindo rejected the theory that the essential conditions of nationality are unity of language, unity of religion and life, or the unity of race. This is the basis for national identity in Europe. Aurobindo pointed out that English nation itself was built out of various races. Switzerland has distinct racial strains speaking 3 different languages and professing different religions. In America, the candidate for White House addressed at the time of the nation in 14 languages. That Austria is a conglomeration of races, languages, and that of divisions in Russia are hardly less acute. He referred to the example of Roman Empire, which created a common language, a common religion and life, and tried its best to crush out racial diversities under the weight of its uniform system. So Aurobindo writes, we answer that there are certain essential conditions: geographical unity, common past, a powerful common interest impelling towards unity, and certain favorable political conditions which enable the impulses to realize itself in an organized government, expressing the nationality and perpetuating its single united existence. A common enthusiasm coalescing with a common interest is the most powerful fosterer of national unity. Friends, I started with Deen Dayal Upadhyay. Let me conclude with how Deen Dayal looked at the question of national identity as a cultural continuum. He discussed this question in detail in various of his lectures. He identified 4 elements that constitute the identity of a nation. 1, a land and people. Second, common aspirations and collective will. Third, a well-organized system of do's and don'ts, which we can call as dharma, rules that guide the actions of the collective. And 4, certain ideals of life that are common to all the people. These 4 together constitute the national identity, not any one of them. Mere land and people do not constitute a nation automatically. There are many territories in the world. North Pole and South Pole have people, but we can't call them nations. Deen Dayal's idea of nation and nationhood was different from that of the Western understanding of it. Deen Dayal says, when a group of people live with a goal, an ideal, a mission, and looks upon a particular land as motherland, the group constitutes a nation. If either of the two, an ideal and a motherland, is not there, then there is no nation. Deen Dayal's description of the nation, like how Vivekananda called it Dharma Prana Bharata, Deen Dayal looked at nation as a living organism. When he says, when a human community living in certain tract of land for centuries starts experiencing a certain identity with it, customizes the special qualities of its life, develops a common set of traditions, a common life mission, common feelings of happiness and sorrow, common experience of friends and foes, a common history through which its great saints and sages nurture the great civilization through their penance and sacrifice. It is then that a nation with a distinct cultural life is born. Friends, this is the cultural identity of the nation that people like Aurobindo and people like Deen Dayal Upadhyay talked about. Deen Dayal Upadhyay differentiated between a country, which is a product of land and people coming together through a legal document like a constitution and a government. Where a country in that sense, but a nation which is all of them, but much more. In fact, he used to cite the example of Israel. I'm not going in detail into it, just except for us to remember that a nation which has lost its territory for almost 2,000 years, but never lost that cultural identity as a nation. And in 1948, they returned to Jerusalem, built their nation again. When they returned to their Jerusalem, it was their fatherland. They did not know the Hebrew language. They did not have any knowledge of their customs and traditions. Yet they left everything behind in their countries to return their promised land. And Deen Dayal raises this very important question. What was that sentiment that had motivated them to return to their fatherland, leaving behind their hard-earned wealth, prosperity, everything? He calls that sentiment of national identity, cultural identity, as the eternal reality. I'm concluding by saying that in India, we don't even use the word nation to describe that cultural identity of our Indianness. Because nation has a specific meaning and understanding in Europe and in the West. The word that we use, probably the scholars in this audience should delve deep into it, is Rashtra. Rashtra is the quintessential Indian concept of nationhood, an ancient idea of nationhood developed by our seers and sages through persistent experiments and analysis, as described by Rabindranath Tagore sitting in the forest. The concept, developed much before the Westerners started thinking about creating one national identity. That rostrum is the essential cultural identity of the nation, of India. Common enthusiasm coalescing with a common interest. This is the basis of our nationhood for millennia. I conclude by quoting Raja Rao, the eminent author and novelist. Raja Rao said, I'm quoting him, it is not the India it is not the Indians who make India. It is India that makes Indians. We must understand that Indian is a different kind of cultural national identity. Being Indian means being a part of that continuous cultural journey of millennia. That is our national identity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Namaskar.
Thank you for this wonderful speech. It is extremely enlightening and erudite also. You have very rightly pointed out that Indian identity is basically cultural identity. And it is not that Indians make India, it is Indian which makes Indian culture which makes an Indian. India. So we are really thankful to you. Now, Padmaji, over to Padmaji.
Yes, thank you, sir, for your enlightening speech, like what you said. Now we will go to the next part of the program. Now I welcome Swami Shri Atmananda Ji Maharaj to address us and give us his blessings. Before I introduce Swamiji, I want to share this small anecdote with you all. Previous time for another webinar, as I had to introduce him, I had prepared a small 3-4 paragraphs introductory note and wanted to check with him if it is to his satisfaction. After reading that, he said, Tulsi, I am a sannyasa and beyond Prakriti. I have nothing to do with this relative world. Why are you saying all these unnecessary details? It is enough if you just speak a little about the work I do. I think this anecdote speaks volumes about him. Swamiji has reached his culmination of his spiritual journey, his Nirvikalpa Samadhi in year 1993 in a cave at Arunachala. Ever since that moment of his life, he worked to divinize Earth's consciousness and to bring spiritual values to all aspects of life. An ashram was built around him at the foothill of this holy mountain. His path is Gita, and he showed this path to many of his devotees across the world. He is the founder of Satyachetana International Spiritual Movement. He is currently a Veda Research Institute and also Universal Veda Gurukulam. He is currently spending most of his time on his commentaries on the Vedas, reviving the Vedic Yajna procedure. He feels that this is the solution to all individual and global problems and challenges. He has given original commentaries on fundamental scriptures like Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, Narada Bhakti Sutras, and also Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Swamiji, please give us your blessings.
Sorry for intervention. If Sri Ram Madhavji wants to leave, he can
Yes.
at his convenience, and we can thank him at that moment. Yeah?
Yes.
He left or he's still there?
Ram Madhavji, sir, are you
I'm
there?
here. I'm here for a few minutes.
Yes, sir.
So we can you thank him first. Huh?
Yes. Usha, sir, we would like you to stay with us till the end of the program. But however, as we are not very sure whether you have time for this or not, we would like to propose a vote of thanks for you. And my co-host, Usha, will you please give the vote of thanks?
Namaste, sir. On behalf of Veda Research Institute, we would like to thank our Honorable Chief Guest, Sri Ram Madhavji, for sparing his valuable time from his busy schedule. Your insight on Indian identity and its cultural continuity has been very useful in bringing clarity of understanding to many of us. We are very grateful to you, sir, for having you here. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for your time. Thanks for it. Thank you.
Swamiji? Swami
Yes,
Shri Atmanandji, will you please bless us and give address us? Give us your blessings.
Om Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Om Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. My humble pranam to Revat Bhattji and Pujya Swami Hari Prasad ji and Dagaji, and my deepest regards and pranam to our chief guest, Ram Madhav ji, and to all the participants here participating in this global webinar on a very delicate and very dynamic and very diluted concept called Indian identity and cultural continuity. So it was such a rare opportunity to listen to our chief guest in his inaugural address, Ram Madhav ji. I've heard about his oratory skill, but never I had any opportunity to listen to him so directly. And he really transmits a force that can create ripples and waves in the mind and the heart of the listener. And I feel it is a great privilege, a great opportunity to listen to one of India's most erudite scholar and speaker on the most controversial concept. So, as our host has tried to introduce me, by that way, perhaps she has tried to give or reveal my identity to the world, which I feel she tried sincerely, but perhaps failed miserably, because once you transcend all identity, then only you can experience the unity. So from that plane of unity, I would share with you all what I feel as about India's identity and cultural continuity. I'm very grateful to our honorable chief speaker, because I'm beginning my address by borrowing a statement from him, which of course he also said, he quoted it, but that itself has a mantric effect, I think, on me, and perhaps if we contemplate, it will have a mantric effect on everyone. That is, it's India that makes Indian. It's not Indians that make India. A very profound philosophical statement, but it's a really very practical way of evaluating our identity and finding out our cultural identity. So India's identity is not the sum total of the identity of Indians that live all over the world. It is not the summation, it is not the addition of the identities of the 1.3 billion Indians that can make India's identity. What is, we all know, whether it is the Western scholars and philosophers or it is the Indian farmers and workers and philosophers and scholars and saints and seers and common men. Everyone agrees on one point, one concept, that is India is the spiritual leader of the world, the guru of whole humanity. That is India's identity. And this is what actually is the main theme which I feel is holding us all together. I can quote in a very short time. I will not take much time because I'm here to listen. I'm not here to actually speak, because God has made me a patient listener. So I love to listen, so I will not take much time. But I would like to say that we all know that Veda, that is the wisdom, that knowledge, when that was revealed, it was revealed for mankind, not for man. It was revealed for the whole humanity. It was not revealed for any particular nationality or any particular religion. Sangashabdam sangbadhabdam sangbo manasing janatan deva bhagam yathapurve sanjanana upasate. This was the message of the Creator. We may call him God, we may call him Lord, we may call him Allah, we may call him Isai, whatever name we may give, we have the freedom. But what is the message of this past revelation, the past word that was ever released to this whole Brahmanda? Sangashabdam sangvadabdam sangbo manasi janatang deva bhavan yathapurve sanjanana upasate. Be together, live together, think together, share together, enjoy together, and everything is here, was here, shall be here as it was. That's why the Creator God said, Samanumanta Samiti Samani Samanang Manasa Chittamesan. Let your mind think alike. Let your vital feel the highest bliss. Let you all have the same goal. O humanity, the entire human race, because you all have received my grace, my light, my love. So, from that state of unity flows the civilization. And as the cycle of evolution passes from one phase to another phase, from the holistic era of truth consciousness to the chaotic era of this Kali, this long evolution has passed through several phases, from unity to diversity to multiplicity to chaos and to anarchy and confusion. So we are in the era of confusion, anarchy, and chaos. That is why we all are actually searching. What is peace? What is the unity It is actually we are searching what is our identity, with what we need to be identified so that we can feel the oneness that is in all. So, due to impact of time, this unity is forgotten. And instead of speaking, debating about the human identity, we have started talking of the identity of each nationhood. From the universal concept of identity, we are talking of national identity. If we talk of national identity, I think what we listen from our honorable chief guest, there cannot be, I think, a more spirited talk and address than what we just listened. If we talk of Indian nationality, I think I have listened to one of the best speakers. But that is not Indian identity. Indian identity is the identity of the whole humanity. Jatra Vishwabhavatakkalidam. Where the whole humanity feels that the entire universe is a big resting place. Jatra Vishwabhavatakkalidam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That is India's identity. So if we are deliberating, we are discussing about Indian identity, we have to remember that Indian identity can never be different from India's identity. And India's identity is universality. India's identity is sacrifice, love, wisdom, tolerance, acceptability. That is India's identity. That is what is enshrined in all our scriptures. India, our constitution, very fast article, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. I think there cannot be a country in the world, there will never be a country in the world like India. So many different languages and dialects, all the religions of the world are practiced here, nourished here, supported here. All the scriptures of all the religions have the origin here in India, be it Bible, be it Quran. If there will be an opportunity for a bigger seminar, I can give a direct, authentic quote from the scriptures. Even Quran is from India. Bible is also what is revealed in India. So Buddhism, Jainism, Judaism, Sikhism, any ism, any religious practice, it is India. So India is the whole universe. And India's identity is the spiritual identity. There can be two identities only for any human being on earth. One is the identity with the spirit, the eternal. The other is the identity with the matter and the material. If the identity is with the spirit, the state of awareness will be unity, imperishability, deathlessness, immutability. And that is the meaning of Bharata. Bharata, first answer Vaya, that is fear. So this is triple fear, Adi Vedic, adibhautik, adhyatmik. This is a triple fear is not there in India's consciousness, in India's soul. So the identity of every Indian is that I am analysis, I am Brahman, I am the immutable, imperishable, eternal presence. That is the identity that every Indian carries. And when we enter into the other identity, that is the identity of matter, mind, vital, experiential identity, that time we think in terms of our mind, we think in terms of our religious belief, we think in terms of our vital experiences. And there comes differences, but not division, differences. As we wear different color of dress, the same ingredient, same vegetable we bring, but we prepare different type of dishes of different taste. Same spices we purchase, but we make it in such a way that each item is different in taste. So this unity in diversity, this is the soul of India. This is the reason every Indian carries that identity of unity in him. This is the reason our scripture says, Tat Tvangasi Aham Brahmasmi Sarpa Khalvedam Brahman Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam Jatra Viswabhavat Kanidam. All these point out only one thing, that is the unity. So India's identity, I will say, is the identity of a whole humanity. If they are in the ascending phase of that evolution in consciousness. And India's identity is also the identity of every human being on earth that is in the experiential side of life. So, in whichever we see, the whole universe, the whole earth, expanded entity, that is India. The whole humanity is actually aspiring and trying, even while struggling with the expansion of the material side of life. The whole human soul is striving to reach that state of unity, so that what our Vedic seers have said, Samanavanta Saviti Samani Samanang Manasa Chittamisad. So that is the identity that every Indian is carrying. And when I see someone in the West, someone in Africa, someone in Europe, who is also striving and aspiring to reach this identity, I feel, oh, here is an Indian. Because India is not only a country having a geographical boundary. India's identity is a borderless identity. It has no limit, and it is not confined even to this earth. It is also all-pervading this Sapta Lokas, right up to Brahmaloka, is the India's identity. Whether it is Pitraloka or Tapaloka or Devaloka or Janaloka or even Brahmaloka, this is the identity. Everyone is striving for this identity, and anyone on this earth, whosoever is striving to consciously putting effort to reach that level of highest identity, where all identification melts away, that person is carrying the soul of India. Whether he speaks India's cultural dialogue or not, it doesn't matter. He is carrying India's cultural consciousness, that is the spiritual consciousness. So that consciousness, that identity, no time can erode, no war can destroy, no poverty can puncture this identity. This is India. So this is such a rare topic Reverend Bharji selected for this webinar. That is why I say Bharji is an ancient Vedic seer born in modern time to inspire us, to guide us, and also to remind us our origin. And in this era, now we are finding great Indians who are actually seer in heart, Samrat in head, seer in heart, but Samrat, king, emperor in head. Now a time has come when India will rise from its ashes, as Swami Vivekananda has said. India will rise from its deserts, its paddy fields, its muddy roads, and India will rise from its villages and factories. Indians, millions of Indians may be illiterate, but not a single Indian you can find anywhere in the world who does not carry the consciousness of unity in him. And every Indian carries the attributes of this Indianness. What is that? First is a firm belief in the ultimate reality. Second, a heart for sharing. Sharing with others what he has. Third is austerity, not indulgence. Austerity is India's identity. Tolerance is India's identity. Universality is India's identity. Sacrifice is India's identity. And non-interference in the thought, belief system, rituals, worship, food habits, non-interference in any of this lifestyle is India's identity, and that is the identity that every Indian carries in heart. Due to the impact of time, this identity has been covered. It is not lost. Identity can never be lost. It can be covered. It can be clouded. So, due to impact of this materialistic culture, it has been covered. And the time has come now. We have now great fears in a disguised form as scholars and the professors and the politicians and administrators. I could see the real India is now rising from ashes, and the whole world will recognize that the identity of a human being can be either the ascension to absolute awareness, or it can be in the descending field of experience. So wherever I go, I have traveled almost 2/3 of the world. But I find that every country, every culture, every religion is carrying Indian identity. Why? Because when there was this landmass called Jambudvipa, the rest of the world was underwater. First man that came to this planet, it's called a Manu. And from Manu comes the mind. So when the first mind descended to this Prakriti plane. From that came this so many human beings, so many race, culture, nationality. So when we are talking of cultural continuity, which cultural continuity we are talking of? We are talking of the cultural continuity of this Indian unity, identity. I have seen wherever I have gone, whether it is South America or Africa or Europe or Asia, every continent of the world, I have traveled and have seen wherever there is an Indian, he carries this identity with him. He may be a millionaire, he may be just a westerner or a taxi driver in some country, but he carries his identity. And the time has come when what he carries in his heart has to be integrated with his head. When there will be this integration, there will be a new consciousness on earth. It will not be called Indian identity, it will be called human identity, the identity of universality, unity. And that is the time when there shall be no war, there will never be any poverty, there will be no disease, and no discord. There will be differences, but no division. That is what our Vedas have said, that is what our seers have said, and that is what our leaders have said. Whether he was a Manu or a Ikkaku, or a Janaka, or a Rama, or a Krishna, whatever it is, everybody has spoken the same language, transmitted the same spirit. And I hope through this webinar, we will be able to send this message so that every Indian and everyone who is carrying Indian identity in heart, that is the spirituality, will find the similarity and will find the unity. And this discovery of this unity among the humanity will create a new world, and we will be ushering in the truth phase of this era of darkness. I do not have to say much because I feel very uncomfortable to speak in front of great learned and revered seers like Bharji and Daveji and our Param Puja Swamiji sitting here. So with this is my heart pouring, this is my realization. With this much I request our host to continue to carry on this webinar so that we all will be enlightened and we all will be inspired and we all will have that determination to dig deeper into our experiential depth, and we'll have strength to ascend and try in our understanding height to find the unity of the whole humanity. And I have no hesitation to say that Jatra Vishwabhavatak Eden, this is the message of our seers, not for those who are in India, but it is the message for all those who are on earth. And every human being on earth carries a fundamental identity. We may call it India, or we may call it America, we may call it Europe, but that one fundamental identity for all humanity is the identity of unity. Thank you. And I bless you all, and I take blessings from all.
We are grateful to you, Swamiji, for your enlightening and liberating words of wisdom. You have rightly pointed out that when we talk of Indianness, it is not geocentric or ethnocentric or anthropocentric. It is universalistic, and therefore we always talk of Virat Manava, not a Kshudra Manava. So you have rightly pointed out what India stands for. And in fact, Indian culture stands for a virtuous mode of living. So it is the virtues which are characterizations of Indianness. And we have a value schema which is all comprehensive, which is holistic, which is having a symbiosis of prayers and shreyas, science and spirituality, and therefore your enlightening address is really very much meaningful and useful for us. Over to Padmaji.
Tell Kaustubh I'm coming down 10 minutes. And
So we are doubly blessed as His Holiness Swami Shri Hariprasad Ji Maharaj from Vishnu Mohan Foundation has given us his kind consent to bless us. So benedictions by Swami Shri Hariprasad Ji.
Narayana, Narayana, Narayana. So I had Professor Bhatt had said I have to come, and so then I'm here. And
We are grateful to you, Swami.
So
It's
Professor
11:30.
Swamiji had some other puja today at 11, and he has taken some sort of excuse from that puja. His own ashram is having a puja.
They're waiting puja for me. They're waiting to start the puja.
Yeah.
So I will not take very long, Professor Ji. And this matter of identity in the Indian context has to be looked at from the point of view of what the Shastras tell us. Shastras tell us how they say that that avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. These are the kleshas. So identity itself is a klesha because we are coming down from being Parabrahman, we are becoming a individual, a small individual. So we are getting compressed. So first is the avidya, that we exist as separate from God. Then asmita, I am. And that is formed by raga and dvesha, among other things. And we have abhinivesha, clinging to the world as we know it. So this is what is identity. We are formed by our environment. We are formed by what we are told. It either in the form of acceptance of the environment and what we are told and the training, or in its rejection. So we see in the case of Adi Shankara, his acceptance of his environment, of the rigor of a person, Nambudiri, learning Vedas. One person told me, he said, when I was 3, they made me start learning Sanskrit. And at 5, they put my sacred thread and made me learn Vedas. I was wondering, why was I not born as a Harijan, that I would have escaped all this? But he accepted that rigor of being a Nambudiri Brahmin and started his knowledge to the extent that when he was 8, he was able to take sannyasa and go on his path, writing the Vishnu Sahasranama Bhashya. He accepted his environment and all the difficulties which came with it and transformed it. On the other hand, we see another Shankaran Nambudiri, E.M. Shankaran Nambudiri. He rejected all his environment. He rejected all that was taught to him. And but he kept his caste name. He kept his caste name. And he rejected everything and plunged into worldly life. So we see two different ways of reaction to our identity. So identity is formed by the environment we live in. So they always say that Hinduism is born in a country which was very rich, which there was always food, there was always home, there was always people helping each other. So except during times of natural calamities, people always had enough to eat. It was a large land with a small population, different from what it is today. And so therefore, life was easy to live. In other lands which are rocky and where there was a lot of pressure to live, more fierce religions came up. More religions which had to tell its adherents, you are the best. While here in Hinduism, they said that let noble thoughts come to us from all sides. They said that existence, the supreme reality is one, and sages speak of it differently. So why was that? Because there is no pressure to survive. So because of that, much more flowering has happened. And that that identity has slowly come about. So I am a believer in the concept of identity crisis created by Eric H. Erickson, saying that there is a time in our lives where some trauma, something will happen, and then we rediscover. I prefer to call it identity rediscovery. We rediscover ourselves. Swami Vivekananda, when his father died and all those difficulties came, he rediscovered that he was not one of those who are going to sit down. He's not going to become a big barrister. He's like W.C. Banerjee or people of that type. But rather he decided that he has to take a spiritual life. And that difficulties which came was not a spur to him to succeed in the physical world, in the world of Artha and Kama, but in the world of Moksha. That was the impetus which that identity rediscovery, the identity crisis gave. And what has happened is that because of this identity held by so many wonderful sages, so many rishis have held this idea of Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti is something which we live. That we can, when we go past a mosque or a church, understand that God is living there. The idea that my Guru said, Sri Sadguru Swami Nyananda Saraswati said, if I see a temple, I pray, I know that Krishna is there. If I see a mosque, there also I know Krishna is living there. So that understanding of it is not based on the idea that my God is going to conquer the rest of the world. It's based on the idea of the understanding and the acceptance of the all-pervasiveness of Bhagavan. That is what is that is what all this is about. This Indian culture is acceptance, and the strongest person in that is Sri Krishna, the strongest figure. He says, in whichever way men approach me, in that way I fulfill them. Whichever form they pray to, I make that faith stronger. And finally, his wonderful statement, I've taught you everything. Now, act as how you feel is right. Act as how you desire. Yatejasi tatakuro. So that wonderful sense of freedom is there in Hinduism, in India, in fact, in the religions of India. So therefore, an organizational structure does not exist. I remember an old man telling me, why should I read Shankara's commentary? I will myself comment on the Gita. So that's a confidence, that's a freedom which Hinduism gives, that's a freedom which India gives. So that is why India, the majority of Indians, even those who have left the Hindu fold and joined other religions, they believe in that acceptance of the other. Donald Eugene Smith, an eminent sociologist, American sociologist, in his seminal work, Religion and Politics in South Asia, he says the reason why there is no communalism in Hinduism is because there is no structure, no one authority which can direct them to do anything. So that one authority can direct you to do good, it can direct you to do bad also. But there's no authority in Hinduism. Everybody is his own master. Everybody is his own is a seeker, and they seek the Guru and they follow the Guru. So the essence of the Indian identity, the Hindu identity, we can see in places like Singapore, where for years the leader of the opposition was a Hindu fighting for this freedom of speech, all the 4 freedoms he fought for. He never got anywhere in life. He suffered always. His children also were ill-treated, but he stayed strong for freedom. So the essence of Hindu Dharma is freedom. First, freedom in this world, and then to attain freedom from this world. Shri Sadguru Arpanamastu, Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. But sir, if you must excuse me, I will come back and join a little later in the afternoon. You know, I believe in staying in the conference always.
Thank you, Swamiji, for sparing your valuable time. You are extremely busy in different spiritual activities, and you have a puja going on.
Yes.
So you excuse yourself from that for a few minutes for us. So we are really grateful to you. You have rightly emphasized that Indian culture stands for universalization of the self,
Yes.
from aham to sarvam, because we always talked of sarve bhavantu sukhina, etc. And you have again rightly pointed out that in Indian culture it is freedom of thinking, freedom of doing, but lawful and legitimate. So it is that sort of freedom which has been emphasized, and that is the essence of Indian culture. And that's why we have welcomed different cultures of the world and imbibed their ideas and ideals. Anu Batra Ha Karantu Vishata. So thank you very much, Swamiji,
And
for.
Jewish New Year. Today is the Jewish New Year.
Oh, very good.
So they are also a very, vibrant part of India.
Yeah.
So
for the information of the participants, Swamiji renovated an old Jewish temple in Kerala, and Swamiji believes in some sort of fundamental unity among all religions, and therefore he is not having any narrow-mindedness so far as religiosity is concerned. Religions may be many, but religiosity is one only. Thank you, Swamiji. Padmaji, thank Swamiji, and then proceed for the next. Padmaji, please.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you so much for your blessings and for your very insightful message to all of us. And when you reminded us that today is Jewish New Year, it just shows that you truly practice what you have said, that unity of spirit is very, very important. It is not these narrow identities which are which belong to this relative world. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you so much.
After the puja, I will return. Narayana.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Now I welcome esteemed Professor S.R. Bhattji to give the keynote address. Actually, he needs no introduction because he is so renowned. All of us know him and he is so dear to all of us. However, as I have to do the introductions, here it goes. Professor S.R. Bhattji is an eminent philosopher and a Sanskrit scholar. He is also an expert of Buddhist and Indic studies. He is the former chairman of Indian Council of Philosophical Research, ICPR. He is currently the chairman of the Indian Philosophy Congress, member of General Council of ICCR, and chairman of Universal Veda Gurukulam, Thiruvannamalai, member of Academic Council of Nalanda International University. He is a professor and former head of the department at the University of Delhi. He has teaching experience of over 44 years. His fields of specialization are many, but to name a few, Indian philosophy and culture, especially Vedic, Jain, and Buddhist, logic and epistemology, and philosophy of religion. Sir, I request you to give the keynote address.
Thank you, Padmaji. I welcome all the learned participants, and my respectful regards to Pujya Swami Atmananji Maharaj. This particular webinar is being organized to discuss what exactly is meant by Indian identity, and as Sri Ram Madhavji has rightly pointed out, Indian identity stands for cultural identity, and this cultural identity has been the backbone of Indian civilization. Indian culture is pretty old, prehistoric in nature, because we do not know its exact apparition. It can be compared like a book whose initial pages are turned out and whose subsequent pages are yet to be written. And therefore, we have a deep rootedness in the past. We have a very vibrant present, and we have a glorious future. Indian culture is something which we call as Sanatana Dharma, and therefore it cannot be brought to an end. Iqbal has rightly pointed out, "Kuch baat hai ki hasti mitti nahi jahan se." Well, we have some surviving instinct, an inherent vitality, a jivishisha, and Dindal Upadhyay ji has used the word chiti for that. Well, we have a chiti, we have a consciousness, national consciousness, which is Virat, which is lively and living, and it is this which we have to be reminded time and again. Well, sometimes we forget about our past. We try to negate also our past, and uh, no country, no culture can survive and thrive if its key concepts, basic ideas get fossilized, and therefore the ideas and ideals inculcated in the Vedic wisdom need to be again and again told to the world, to Indians to start with, and the world at large. Indian culture is wide and variegated, and therefore we have its continuity right from the ancient past up to the modern times, and will continue to be so in future as well. Indian identity, our national identity, we are using the word national in the sense of Rashtra, as Sri Ramadhoji has pointed out, is something which is essential. Mere independence is not enough. Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay ji pointed out, and I quote him, "It is essential that we think about our national identity. Without this identity, there is no meaning of independence, nor can independence become the instrument of progress and happiness. As long as we are unaware of our national identity, we cannot recognize and develop all our capacities. So we have to be reminded time and again about our Indian identity, which is an embodiment of noble ideas and ideals, which are highly sublime and sophisticated. And the Rishi of Yajurveda says, Sa Prathama Sanskriti Vishwavara, where ours is the oldest civilization. And it is something which is to be emulated by the entire world. And this idea of its being something to be emulated by the entire world has been recognized not only by many sages and seers of India, but also some foreigners. So let me quote Macaulay. Of course, Macaulay is not very much in favor of uh, Indian mind because of his system of education. But in his minutes, he writes, many centuries before Christ, when the people of England were still wearing raw skins on their painted bodies and roaming widely in forests, even in the remote antiquity, Indians had attained a high degree of civilization. So, the point is this, that Indian culture is not only ancient, but it is also quite sublime. And because of its surviving instinct, well, it is equally relevant as it was in the past. Now, this Indian culture is holistic in nature, and therefore it comprehends all dimensions, all facets of our life and our existence and reality as well. We have, therefore, what may be called as a sublime Indian culture, and this sublime Indian culture is not having any narrow identity. The identity that we have is universalistic identity, and therefore we want that every human being should be virtuous. The term that we use for a virtuous person is Arya, and we say Karmantu Vishwarya, let the whole world be civilized, let the whole world be virtuous, let the whole world have some sort of amity, some sort of mutuality, some sort of reciprocity, and therefore in Indian culture we always insisted, and this should be something which is to be emulated at all the times, that there has to be sahvasa, peaceful coexistence, sahakara, mutual cooperation, and sahabhoga, having mutual caring and sharing. And for that, well, there should be maitri, universal friendship, karuna, universal compassion, mudita, rejoicing in the well-being of others, and upeksha, not to be selfish, narrow-minded, and so forth. Well, these are the virtues which have been emphasized in Indian culture. Indian culture is dharma-centric, and Sri Ram Madhavji already referred to that. And by dharma, we mean the those principles which sustain our life. Dharmo dharayati prajaha, he said from Mahabharata. And it is not only a sustaining principle, it is also a regulating principle of our life, because we human beings are prone to perversion, and there might be aberrations in our conduct. Quite often we find that the Asuri Vritti becomes a dominant, and we have many distortions, many ills and evils in our modes of thinking and also in our ways of living. We have witnessed this in Indian society, but we also had seers and sages who advised us to cultivate Devi Vritti and to curb the Asuri Vritti. So the concept of Sanyama is there, concept of Tapa is there in our culture, which makes us control our basal instincts and enable us to rise above all narrowness or limitations. And therefore, we these narrowness or limitations we call as asat, and we say asatoma sadagamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityurma amritam gamaya. So this is Indian culture, and this Indian culture has been not just a matter of articulation. It is not a matter of ideation. It's a matter of feeling. It is a matter of having that psyche, that mental makeup, which is universalistic in approach. And this universalism is Indian characterization of spirituality. This is Indian understanding of spirituality, in which we don't talk of aham, but we always talk of sarvam. Well, we may have multiplicity, and therefore there can be otherness. Otherness is naturally there because there are differences, there are multiplicity. Otherness is there, but this otherness is not exclusive otherness. It is inclusive otherness, like a living organism in which different organs are there. Well, one organ is different from other than the other organ, and therefore otherness is there, but this otherness is not exclusive. The different organs they are not just mere assemblage of different organs. They have an organic unity, and in that organic unity there is a harmony, there is an order, there is reciprocity, and there is mutuality, and it is a living organism which characterizes Indian culture. Indian culture, therefore, we find there is an approach of samanvaya, symbiosis, samanvaya of prayas and shreyas, samanvaya of abhyudaya and nishreyas, samanvaya of paravidya and aparavidya. Well, Isavashopanishad is quite insistent on that. So, what we find is that Indian culture is integral in nature, has taken into consideration all dimensions of life and reality. In the Tetri Upanishad, we have the theory of a Panchakosha, where we have Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya koshas. In the West, we have only twofold distinction in the nature of reality, mind and matter. And there is a sort of separation between the two. So this is famous Cartesian dualism, where there is mind versus matter. But in India, in Indian culture, we don't talk of mind versus matter. We say matter and mind. So we have Annamaya Kosha and we also have Manomaya Kosha. And the internal reality is not just confined to mind. Mind is only one of the facets of internal reality. Uh, the internal reality is a psychophysical continuum animated by spiritual principle. So it is the spiritual principle which is the animating principle, which is the life-giving principle, and which is therefore the controlling principle of our living organism. This is what we have been told in Antaryami Brahman of Vrihadaranyaka Upanishad. And this is the summum bonum of Indian spirituality, self-realization. In Indian culture, therefore, we find there are elements which are sublime, and sophisticated, and therefore they are to be emulated world over. An Indian, in fact, always goes abroad, then we have that sort of mobility from ancient times up to the modern times. But wherever an Indian goes, Indianness, Indian identity also goes along with him or her. And therefore we can say, oh, he's an Indian, or she is an Indian. Well, that Indianness, that appellation Indianness is attached intrinsically with every Indian who lives in India or goes abroad. So we have therefore a cultural continuity. Unfortunately, in India, our culture gets quite often distorted, and we have many anomalies. For example, we had this Varna Vyavastha being perverted into Jativada, and this poison of casteism is very much vitiating our existence. But the Indians who have gone abroad, they have preserved the purity of Indian culture, and it goes to their credit. They have preserved Indian culture in its pristine form. And these Indians have gone to different parts of the world, and they do not disown their Indian identity. Rather, they are proud of that, and therefore we have a cultural continuity within India and also abroad. This Indian identity is therefore something which is to be nourished, and it is something which is to be inculcated in the minds of young Indians in particular. Or we don't insist on Indian say nationality or Indian citizenship. Well, whosoever willingly accepts Indian cultural mode of thinking, that is democracy in ideas, and ways of living, that means unity in multiplicity and multiplicity in unity. It is both ways. It is centripetal as well as centrifugal. So we have a multiplicity springing from unity, and the unity abiding in all multiple manifestations. And therefore, whosoever accepts this particular ideology, well, he can be characterized as Indian by cultural affinity. So, to be born in India is not necessary to be an Indian. Indian nationality is not to be mixed up with Indian culture. But we may have different nationalities. Indians, if they go abroad, they adopt different nationalities. But then at the same time, they retain Indian culture. So Indian culture is not in conflict with their alien nationality. And therefore, you can have this sort of feeling that as nationals, they may belong to different states, but they are still Indian in their blood, in their mode of thinking and way of living. Now, another characteristic of Indian culture is that here it is having spiritual orientation, but it does not deny matter. The prayasa, the material prosperity is not to be negated. Taittiriya Upanishad says, Annam Vai Brahma. So matter is to be respected. But matter should not lead to materialism. Materialism is a particular mindset which is very much narrow and say, in a sense, negative in nature, and therefore we regard matter as a part and parcel of reality, and is to be regarded as a stepping stone for the furtherance of life. And therefore, in our culture, we have the theory of four purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, which reference has been made. Earth and kama are very much needed. They provide basis to our living. So without earth and kama, we cannot survive. Earth stands for uh, generating resources for material wellness. And kama means legitimate use of those resources. So this is what is known as vyavhara. So we have this vyavharik satta or vyavharik jivana, but that is not the end all and be all. We have to transcend it and go beyond that. So from vyavhar, we have to reach to paramartha. But without vyavhara, paramarth cannot be realized. Vyavaram anaditya paramartho nadishyate. And therefore, there has to be a happy symbiosis of vyavhara and paramartha. In Indian culture, equal emphasis was laid on both science and spirituality. India was not only a Vishwa Guru in the field of spirituality, but also in the field of science. The way we had, can say, penetrated deep into mathematical thinking, decimal system, or say invention of zero, or the astronomy, the movement of the heavenly bodies, and the impact of heavenly bodies on earth and earthly creatures, including human beings. So and the way we have delved deep into ocean and brought out say some of the valuable goods from ocean. So India, therefore, was at the height of its pinnacle in the field of science. We called it Aparavidya, but Aparavidya was very much needed and essential. But we always said that from Aparavidya, we have to transcend to Paravidya. And therefore, from science, we have to go to spirituality. That means we have to spiritualize science. And we should also make spirituality scientific. Because if you don't make spirituality scientific, it may result into dogmatism, it may result into ritualism, it may result into some external manifestations like different sects, different modes of worship, etc., etc. And therefore, always it was insisted that spirituality should be seasoned by science. So science and spirituality are complementary to each other, and they must go hand in hand. Indian culture has another characteristic, and that is it believed in virtuous living, and therefore value schema has been propounded. The value schema uh, pertains to different facets of our existence, and therefore these values are postulated not for debate and discussion. They are postulated for transforming our life being made virtuous. We had therefore the idea of a Vrati Samaj, a virtuous society. These days in the West, we talk of civil society, but a civil society cannot be civil unless virtues are inculcated. So, value orientation of our life has been the keynote of Indian culture. In Indian culture, therefore, we find that our approach is universalistic, both in terms of considering the other as one's own self, Atmavata Sarva Bhuteshu, but also in treating others with equal respect, with equal dignity. We regard this cosmos as a interplay of interrelated forces, and therefore there is always reciprocity, and there has to be mutual give and take. We cannot lead an isolated life, and therefore we have to take care of everyone. A reference has been made to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or Bhavatu Vishwa Ek Needam. So that idea is there, wherein there is perfect harmony, there is amity, there is peace, there is some sort of mutual partaking, and therefore this widening of the self, I call it a spiritual globalization. It is this which is the foundation of Indian culture, and it is this which makes Indian culture acceptable to countries outside India. In fact, we don't regard countries outside India as alien. We regard them as our own. This whole world is one single family or one single organism, of which there are different organs or parts. And therefore, we just say that we are the pind in the Brahmanda, and this idea of belonging to the whole. This is holistic approach is the keynote of Indian culture, and we have to be reminded of it time and again, particularly to our younger generation, so that they do not forget the rich heritage that is bestowed on us by ancient sages and seers. And this rich heritage should not be confined to India only. It must be disseminated all over the world, because we cannot lead an isolated life. India cannot be by its own. India has to be Vishwa Guru, both in science as well as in spirituality. We have to tell the world that science is not value neutral. Science is to be utilized for the wellness of humankind in conformity with nature. And therefore, we cannot antagonize nature. It would be a fallacious thinking, according to Indian culture, that a tiny human being can conquer a mighty nature. Therefore, we are part and parcel of nature also. Apart from being spiritual, we have the material dimension also, which is given to us by nature, and therefore we have to be respectful to nature. We have to be obliged to nature for its benevolence and bountifulness. And therefore, this is the Indian culture, which stands for nature being
Thank you, sir.
mother,
Comments on
always
his
mother nature. We say, Atharvaved says, Mata Bhumihi Putro Aham Prativyaha. So that idea is something which is foundational to Indian culture, and therefore we have not only to raise environmental concerns, which we do on different platforms, but we have to cultivate environmental consciousness, and that is Indian culture that we have to take into account. Finally,
Sir.
Indian culture also has a seminal idea of a law of a karma and punarjanma. This is needed for having a sound foundation to ethics, morality. We have to perform virtues. We have to desist from doing evil vices, and if we do good, result will be good. If we do evil, result will be evil. So this law of karma has been a guiding principle of Indian cultural ethos. And if we do not have fulfillment for our virtuous deed in this life, then we may have a next life, and therefore karma and rebirth they go together, and that gives us a psychological satisfaction apart from having a logical connection between karma and punarjanma, and therefore we have a doctrine of karma which is having three facets. It is attributive, it is retributive, and it is formative. It attributes agency to the person who indulges in activity and points out, as Bhagavad Gita says, that we should be an agent without having attachment to the consequences. And therefore, this anasakta karma yoga, this has been the keynote of Indian culture. And if we act without any consideration for the consequences, but with good motive, is the Shubha Sankalpa. We had this prayer in the beginning itself, Tanme Manaha Shubha Sankalpastu by the Vidyarthis of the Gurukula. So Shubha Sankalpa is very much to be inculcated. This is the keynote of Indian culture. So if we have a virtuous mind, our conduct also will be virtuous. If we have Bodhi Chitta, our charya also will be Bodhi Charya. But then there has to be Bodhi Chittavatara, there are also to be Bodhi Charyavatara, and for that we need to be reminded time and again through our system of education, the sublime values which have been inculcated and handed down to us by way of heritage by our ancient sages and seers, and which have been reiterated by many social reformers in the medieval times as well also in modern times. So we have, for example, when we talk of Shrutis and Smritis, in modern times we had Narayan Guru in Kerala who propounded Narayan Smriti, a small tract, of course, but then, he also has pointed out as to how we can have a noble mode of living and be helpful to the whole humanity. So, as I said earlier, also we talk of Vishwamanava or Virata Purusha, and that has been the teachings of Indian culture. But one thing is there, before we go to serve from aham, it is aham which has to be made solid and strong. Without a strong aham, without the footing of a strong aham, we cannot go to sarvam. So there has to be a happy transition from aham to sarvam, and for that we have to enlighten the aham. When we say Atmanam Vijanihi, well, it is both ways. It is the individual self which is to be enlightened, and also the universal self. But you cannot have enlightenment of individual without the universal, nor can you have enlightenment of the universal without the individual. There has to be reciprocation between the individual and the universal, because both of them are belonging to the same reality, which is organic in nature. One thing more about Indian culture. Indian culture is not dogmatic, and therefore freedom, as has been rightly pointed out by His Holiness Swami Shri Hari Prasad Ji, it is freedom which is foundational to Indian culture. Well, we say Ekam Sat Vipraha Bodha Vadanti, or we say, Lord Krishna says in the Gita that whosoever approaches me with whatever mindset, I reciprocate the same. So it is this freedom which is basic to Indian culture, and because of that, we say that I have my own mode of thinking, but you also may have your own mode of thinking. And there can be mutuality. So vade vade jayate tatvabodha, mutual complementarity has to be there. And if that is the case, then there will be always a democracy in ideas, no conflict, no disharmony, no, of course, there can be disagreement, but we should also agree to disagree. Well, this is the message of Indian culture, that no dogmatism, no regimentation in thought, no obscurantism. We should have that openness of mind, so that we may have noble ideas coming from all over the world and making our life more and more virtuous. Thank you very much for this. And uh, now over to Padmaji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your very insightful keynote address. You have you spoke in detail about the deep rootedness of India's past and Indian culture and its vibrant present and the vision for the glorious future. Thank you, sir. And another
Thank
very
you.
important thing that you spoke about is spiritualizing science, and that spirituality should also be seasoned by science. It's a very, very important approach that we should all remember. Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now I welcome Professor V.K. Malhotra ji to present his paper. He is a member secretary, Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. Also professor as well as head of the Department of Economics. He has served as professor and head of the Department of Economics at CCS University, Meerut. His research interests include governance and economic development, corporate governance and performance of various industries, intellectual property rights, and India's concerns, foreign trade and investments, etc. He is on the board of Indian Council of World Affairs and a visitor's nominee to the court of Jawaharlal Nehru University. Sir, I welcome you to make your presentation.
Thank you, Padmaji. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you are. We welcome you. We are audible.
Thank you. So, very respected Professor S.R. Bhattji, in absentia, Shri Ram Madhavji, and I was listening to Swami Atmanandji and Swami Hari Prasadji also. There are a number of luminaries I could see that those who think about India, those who are representative of Indian ethos, culture, and spirituality are very much part of this webinar. When Professor Bhatt asked me to participate in this webinar, I did say that I would definitely like to participate as a learner and not as a speaker, in fact, because before such luminaries who are not only scholars in a very narrow sense of the word, but those who are scholars of life and spirituality also, listening to them, knowing through them the secrets of life, philosophy, and the missions of life is a great treat in itself. So it definitely gives us a chance to listen to and try to understand. Over the last few days, I've been talking about, and on a number of occasions, I have discussed the issue of the abstractness in science, mathematics, and also in philosophy. I would not be delving upon that issue right now, but since my discipline happens to be economics, and so the training in that very discipline forces me to think in terms of few mundane things also and try to correlate those mundane things with the spiritual, cultural, and civilizational dimensions of Indianness. I'll be very brief, and when Professor Bhatt said it to me that how much time would you like to take, I said that as minimum as possible for me, because after such people having spoken and enlightened our minds, I mean, very little is left to be added to what has already been said. Uh, Professor Bhatt, I have enjoyed uh, different concepts that you have tried to put here, and maybe some of those concepts are already known to us, but repeated remembrance and revisiting to those terms would definitely enlighten our minds much better, and would definitely somewhere take us, I'm not using the word force us, to see the things in another light also, and try to correlate the things as these are happening in our own country and all over the world also. The objectives of life have been very well discussed. Uh, I'll be a bit simple and try to correlate the things with happenings in India and around the world. When we talk of India, what comes to our mind? And we ask people, when you think of India, what are the attributes that you would like to assign to India? Professor Bhatt has spoken about number of things: sublime and sophisticated Indian culture, virtuous person, the Arya, inclusiveness, sustainability, peaceful coexistence, mutual caring and sharing, compassion. He did talk of mudita also, and dharma centric, the approach of samanvaya, that is coordination. So the few issues that must strike our mind are who we were, who we are, and what we aspire to. These three questions, they definitely connect us in various ways, both civilizationally as well as culturally. And what could be the possible reasons of our continuity as a nation, as a culture, and also as a civilization? We know we have lot many scriptures which date back to several thousand years. I was reading from few researches done in Europe and US, uh, and for governance aspect, for many other aspects, performance related aspects, they say that length of democracy is very, very important. Professor Bhatt has already spoken about, and Swamiji also spoke about liberty. Democracy is a very small version of uh, the liberty, the freedom that our culture, both philosophically and also in practice, has given us, or we may have inherited from that. As I said, I mean, how do we, in your concept note also, you have written a number of things, Padmaji. Uh, I see what we eat, what we wear. They are not mere aspects of culture. Of course, they are mere reflections of how we think about life, its objectives, and mission of life. You ask an average Indian, whether in India, in a metropolitan city, in a remote part of the country, or anywhere in the world. Professor Bhatt was talking about diasporic population also. He did talk of non-resident Indians also, and I add to that people of Indian origin who may have forgotten their Indianness, whose parents might have migrated, or their ancestors might have migrated 400, 500, 300. I have met those people also. How do they visualize the whole life? But one thing, and even Swamiji spoke about conversion also. Even when we talk of conversion, those who are converted also, if you talk to them, what is their Indianness? What is the mission of their life? I think there is a common point that we try to reach at. Of course, the mundane things, the material aspects and purely material aspects, much devoid of our spirituality, may have led them to think in, I mean, otherwise some very, let's say, worldly terms. But if you ask an average Indian anywhere, as I said, whether in India or abroad, will notice that he would definitely philosophize that mission of life. And the philosophy of a man on the street is not much different from the philosophy of a king in India. And it has not been much different. I'm compelled to think how Rama becomes Rama, how Krishna becomes Krishna, and how Siddhartha becomes Buddha in India. These three are examples of one who was supposed to be a king. Rama became Rama not because Rama was a king. Rama became Rama because he spent 14 years in exile. And he went on to, wipe out completely the evil, the bad things from the society. When we talk of Krishna, the image of Krishna that appears before us is a Krishna who is full of love, affection, benevolence, compassion, who is a musician also, and who can take even the big political things as a joke in one's life. This is the wisdom that this culture, this civilization provides to each one of us through our iconic images also. And Siddhartha becomes Buddha also. I was reading a text on that, Siddhartha, why Siddhartha could afford to become Buddha. The answer was that only Siddhartha could afford to become Buddha because nobody else, one who was not in that position of being a king, could not afford to become an enlightened entity. So renouncing the things perhaps becomes another very critical aspect of our culture. One who does not believe in accumulation, but renouncing the things. All three examples, whether Rama, Krishna, or Buddha, that I've tried to gather. Even when I talk of Nanak, Nanak is another example of big renouncement. One who is not into trade, one who could give the commodities that he was trading in free of cost to the people who were most needy. Then and then only one becomes Nanak also. Of course, the concept of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, they have been talked about and I think elucidated in detail. The only thing that strikes me is that we start from dharma and end at moksha. And in between lie artha and kama. So I take it like this, that dharma is the starting point of our culture. This is when we are born through a definite dharma. And this is where from we start. The mission of life being moksha. And through what? Through artha and kama, we try to achieve the moksha, that is the highest objective of life. Of course, dharma, we all know, as has been said, that ekam sat vipra bahuda vatanti. And I believe in Indian context, another important thing is that there is no difference between the microcosm and the macrocosm. Yad pinde tad brahmande. What we are trying to see, the whole world analyzes the micro issues and the macro issues separately. We have a culture, a tradition of looking at the micro entities, and what happens to be true in their life definitely is the truth of the entire life at a macro level. And this is why dharma at individual level becomes dharma at the society and the level of the nation. I know the differences that have been highlighted among state, nation, and Rashtra. In Indian context, if we talk about the whole history of India, of course, there is a famous book from Angus Madison, and a number of scholars refer to that book. He writes that up to 1600, India was the most leading country of the world. And the next was China. China took over India only in the 17th century. And if we talk of the recent past, then only in late 60s and early 70s, we saw in the modern times, China taking over India. So two great civilizations or cultures, they were virtually growing together. And it is only in the recent past that as a result of different kind of political systems, maybe one system which is too much material in nature has led them to the competitive objectives or to the material objectives more than anything else. Just comparing, the Prime Minister has used on a number of occasions one expression, expansionism. Uh, uh, I have been using this expansion for a few years, and very rightly said that our idea of transcending our geographical boundaries was never political expansionism. Our idea of transcending our boundaries was definitely related to love, affection, universality, commonness among our objectives, and heart and soul have been the primary and the most significant issues to us. Uh, this is why uh, many speakers, preceding speakers, have spoken about how we treat land, how we treat nature. So we know we come from a philosophy that does not distinguish between land and natural resources. The very idea of Ricardo treating land as all natural resources is derived from the basic Indian thinking. And this is why nature for us, land for us, anything that comes to us as free of cost, anything that comes to us as a providence of God is land and the nature. And this is why land and nature, they become our mother also, because mother is full of affection. The mother is very caring also. Very importantly, only in the modern times, the whole idea of labor has been interpreted in different contexts. But our idea of labor is derived from the very idea of who is our Narayana. Daridra is our Narayana. I mean, number of things that have been put against India, I think they have been done without having much idea about our culture and our basic ethos. Those of us who have slight idea about that or try to know about that are very clear in mind that this continuity of our culture has definitely been seen over centuries and centuries. And till date, there is no dilution in that. Of course, some individuals may indulge in some variations or time to time oscillations, but when we talk of the larger reality, the situation does not appear to be that. I fail to understand that I mean, on Gita, on different interpretations of Gita also, we know it, and all of us are aware of that. Even the very idea of poverty in India has been tried to be explained. And I read one explanation that how Deepavali or Holi could be celebrated the way we celebrate in India. One explanation comes in the form that only India, being culturally so rich, could afford to celebrate it the way we used to, or way we used to, or still celebrate it. I'm reminded of several statements of the spiritual leaders of the country. So, one, the nation that believes in Daridra being Narayan also, or Narayan not only existing in the hearts or the souls of riches, but also in the hearts, minds, souls, and homes of the poorest of the poor also. Right? How that nation could definitely be considered to be even materially poor. So it must definitely, and the very idea of, I know that the kind of narratives that are built uh, all over the world at times in order to belittle our culture also. And these are largely built around certain concepts, poverty, inequality being too important among them. And I'm trying to look at that situation, because a nation which is so rich at heart, where the belief of the king and the lord and the god is renouncing what he has, so how that culture could at all be considered to be anti-poor or a believer of inequality? Our vastness, culturally, philosophically, did not ever exist in, as I said, geographical expansion, economic expansion, political expansion, or even linguistic expansion. All these happened over historical period on its own. Wherever we go in the world, whether India or Central Asia or Far East Asia or even certain countries in Europe, many of us will find lot many linguistic similarities also. I have a very strong belief that we, being one of the most culturally rich and historical country, uh, we must definitely we must have given a language to the world, where from all other languages in the world have got inspired for their origins at different points of time. The only issue that we need to take up is that we need to strengthen it with still more researches. We have definitely been a culture which is very sound, sensible, and as I said, the whole narrative in the West on governance and performance is based on the length of a country as a democracy, as a free society. I was arguing with some Western scholars. When you say the length of a democracy, do you take democracy in modern context, or do you take democracy that has existed for more than 2,000, 3,000 years in a country? So which democracy or which length of democracy are we talking about? That becomes a really very important question. There is no doubt about it that we have been a knowledge-based country, and this is why the material world, the material packages have been unimportant for us, and we have always aspired for asto ma sadgame, tamso ma jyotirgame. I am reminded of the famous words of Rama when he tells his younger brother Lakshmana, Api Swarnamai Lanka Name Lakshmana Rochate Janni Janmabhumischa Sarvatapi Garyasi. So this is what India stands for. When I look in terms of India, China, India, Pakistan, or any other neighbor standoff also, I see, and when Indian soldiers were confronting Chinese soldiers, I felt about a thing very strongly, that Indian person is standing on the border is essentially a soldier, whereas anybody else before is a mercenary. This is what makes the total difference, and that is what makes the difference in strength and the outcome we have seen. The only thing is that as a nation, of course, all big principles that we have talked about, all virtues that we aspire to have, universality, tolerance, non-interference, liberty, assimilation, and natural expansion. By natural expansion, I mean 2,500 years back, or 2,100 years back, or 1,000 years back, India was much bigger than what it is now, not geographically, but essentially culturally and in terms of spirit and soul. Wherever we went, people were welcoming us. We did not try to threaten them. We did not try to control them, but they became our own people. Even when we look at the change of faith in our own country, this argument is much more strengthened. So unity among the things is definitely one of our very, very loved principle. And of course, our whole culture is not based on dividing the things. We have been a society which has believed firmly in holistic thinking, in inclusive thinking. Sustainability is a new word. We have lived it for more than several thousand years. It's a new buzzword in the international market. I'm using a term market. What sells becomes marketable also. So we did
Sir.
not. I'll just stop in a minute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry,
So I'll stop with the words of Swami Vivekananda. India is the blessed Punya Bhumi, the land of virtue, the land where humanity has attained its highest towards generosity, purity, calmness, and above all, the land of introspection and spirituality. This is our introduction of India and the Indian culture. You gave me an opportunity, thanks to the organizers, and I'm told that Veda Research Institute is doing a lot of work in this area. I hope we will remain connected, and I'll come to know about still more scholarship from your institute. Namaskar to you.
Thank you, Professor Malhotra, for a very erudite and scholarly presentation. You have touched different aspects of the theme, particularly your explanation of expansionism, because we never believed in geographical or political expansionism, but only cultural. And there was no cultural hegemony. Our culture was also accepted willingly as something which is ennobling and enlightening by the masses wherever it went. So we are thankful to you. Now, over to Padmaji.
Yes. Now I invite Professor Kumar Ratnamji to make his presentation. He is a great scholar, and he is a member secretary for the ICHR and ICPR, Indian Council of Historical Research, and the Indian Council of Philosophical Research. Sir, will you please make your presentation? Sir, are you there?
They doesn't seems to be he's there. They think.
Okay. Okay. So I think hopefully he will join us a little later. Now
he can be contacted by Ushaji.
Yes, we will try. He's not responding. We tried it, but we will try once again. Now I invite Professor Jeo Leong Lee, the president of Korean Society for Indian Studies and professor and head of the Department of Integrative Medicine, Sun Moon University from Korea. He is the principal of Korea Yoga Academy, which is called Lee Ashram. It was established by him in the year 2006. And he is a member of mentor group of Sanchi University of Buddhist Indic Studies. He was selected as the winner of ICCR Distinguished Indologist Award in the year 2019. So he is going to, Professor Jeong Lee is going to speak about integration of spirit and matter, the essence of Indian identity. Sir, we welcome you to present your paper.
So please unmute yourself. Yes.
Hello. Okay, thank you, Padmaji, for introducing me to the audience. And I'm very glad to see you in this webinar on Indian identity and cultural continuity. And
Thank you,
especially
sir.
as my respected Professor S.R. Bhatt is here. How are you, sir? How are you?
Thank you.
Yes.
Quite fine. Thank you.
Yes, now I'm in my
Welcome.
ashram, the ashram. And also my respected Professor Panirselvam. So am I here, sir? Hello, sir. How are you, sir? Yes, I just now, Padmaji introduced me once I was a student of Madras University and Delhi University. And sometimes I say that in my university and public lectures, maybe at least 1/2 of my identity is made up of Indian culture and philosophy. So this conference is on Indian identity and cultural continuity. So I hope that through this conference, maybe I can understand and know more deeply and exactly who I am. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Today, especially, I would like to talk about integration of matter and spirit and matter in Indian culture. It has been generally said that the traditional Indian culture is predominantly spiritual. However, this morning, as my respected Professor S.R. Bhatt already pointed out, that when Indian culture is said to be spiritual, the term spiritual here does not mean to ignore or exclude material aspect of our life. In fact, more than any other culture, Indian culture has emphasized the importance of material life in the process of spiritual uplifting, which is also evident in their cosmology. As we know, in Vedanta philosophy, Brahman is regarded as nimitta karana, efficient cause, and upadana karana, material cause of the world. And the main concern in Vedantic philosophy, causality, is not nimitta karana, but upadana karana was main concern. Acknowledging the material aspect of ultimate reality is a characteristic of Indian thought, not seen in Western philosophy. In addition, in fact, Satkaryavada of Sankhya is meaningful on the premise of the material aspect in ultimate reality. So this afternoon, I would like to talk about the characteristic aspect of the integration of matter and spirit in Indian culture. The integration of spirit and matter in Indian culture has been understood as a dynamic process in which matter is sublimated into spirit, which means that matter is returned to its original cause. But the integration of spirit and matter does not end here, to my understand. The integration of spirit and matter eventually sublimates to a dimension in which the distinction between the two disappears. Materiality and spirituality should be disappeared in the end. Usually, the integration of matter and spirit means the horizontal union of these two principles, the compatibility of these two in our lives, and such integration is found not only in Indian culture, but also in other cultures. The most striking feature of the integration of spirit and matter in Indian culture lies in the fact that the integration of these two is understood as a dynamic transformation of matter into spirit, and ontological continuum between these two is recognized. In other words, the distinction between matter and spirit is relative, and these two are ontologically continuous. Given that Brahman is Upadana Karana of the world, there is an ontological continuum between Brahman and the material world. And all beings in the world are both material and spiritual at the same time. Since the ontological continuum of matter and spirit is recognized in Indian culture, matter is considered as real as spirit, and therefore worldly life is not regarded less important than spiritual pursuit. A life that integrates matter and spirit includes and takes into consideration every aspect of life rather than excluding any reality of life as undeserving of consideration. The great message of Indian spiritual tradition is that there is nothing unspiritual in this world. Strictly speaking, our lives are not a process of moving from material to spiritual, but from less spiritual to more spiritual, from lesser truth to higher truth. Of course, matter and spirit are not always equally important in the course of each individual's spiritual growth. Generally speaking, material aspects are important in the early stages of life. This morning also, my respected Professor S.R. Bhatt already pointed out, the four ashramas of Brahmacharin, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, which is unique in Indian culture, shows how the integration of spirit and matter is integrated sequentially throughout our life. The four ashramas represent the different steps by which man gradually purifies himself from all earthly taint and becomes fit for his spiritual home. The seers of ancient India have established that in Brahmacharya ashrama, knowledge is imparted. Grihastha ashrama, the knowledge obtained in the first stage is put into practice, while the Vanaprastha and Sannyasa, the two final ashramas, they have much to do with the spiritual goal of the individual. In the first two stages of the four ashramas, Brahmacharya and Grihastha, we must be faithful to material life, and through this, we achieve two of the four Purusharthas, Artha and Kama. In comparison, spiritual pursuit is more important. The last two stages of Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. And through these two stages, we realize spiritual goals, Dharma and Moksha. The four ashramas clearly show the meaning of matter in the process of spiritual achievement in Indian culture. Worldly life and spiritual pursuit are not separate but continuous, and the former is the foundation for the latter. The ultimate purpose of life is moksha, but it is impossible to expect moksha without the realization of artha and kama. The four ashramas, on the other hand, means the delusion of materiality, and on the other means the realization of spirituality, both of which occur at the same time in opposite directions. In other words, the delusion of materiality is the realization of spirituality. In other words, the integration of spirit and matter implied by the 4 ashramas is the realization of spirituality through the delusion of materiality, which is the most important characteristic of the integration of spirit and matter in Indian culture. One thing to be pointed out here is the process and the method by which materiality becomes dilute and detoxified. From the perspective of Indian culture, detoxification of materiality is possible only through material prosperity. Materiality is at the opposite point of spirituality, and matter can also be called shackles that block our spiritual uplift. But the teaching of the 4 ashramas is that if we fail to achieve material prosperity in life, the shackles will not be released. The fact that material prosperity is regarded as an antidote to materiality is the identity of the Indian culture. And in this respect, Indian culture is distinguished from, I think, Buddhism, which seeks to overcome materiality by alienating and denying matter. In fact, the internal structure in which matter and mind spirit are integrated is similar to the process of which Bhoga, in the Yoga Sutra, Bhoga becomes the foundation of Apavarga, liberation in yoga. According to the Yoga Sutra, Prakriti exists for the experience and liberation of Purusha. Experience is possible because there is a material body, and experience in our lives means pain. But only through experience, that is, only through pain, can spiritual growth and dissolution be achieved. Likewise, in our lives, matter is like a shackle that blocks spiritual growth. But nevertheless, overcoming materiality is only possible through the experience of material prosperity. It can be said that the starting point of most religious traditions is the awareness that life is suffering, and that Indian religious tradition is no exception. But in Indian religious tradition, the starting point is not poverty, but material prosperity, which is especially different from Western Christianity. In other words, unlike Christianity, the starting point in Indian religious tradition is the awareness of life as suffering which arises from material prosperity. That's therefore life in reality is very important in the path of spiritual uplift, and such despair occurs not only in the material poverty but also in material prosperity. From the point of Indian culture, generally speaking, despair arising from material prosperity can be the real starting point of religious life and yoga practice. In the lives of Mahavira and Gautama Buddha, we can find representative of examples of that. Of course, material prosperity does not always lead to spiritual uplift for a society or individual. In other words, material prosperity is not a necessary and sufficient condition for spiritual uplift. One of the main causes of the rise of Buddhism and Jainism, representative of Indian spiritualism in the northern part of the Ganga River in the 6th century BC, is the material prosperity of the region at that time. The area that at that time was very rich in life as agriculture developed greatly due to the use of iron farming tools, which began around the 8th century BC. Ironically, however, we know that in the same region of the same period, there was also unprecedented Charvakas and Lokayatas in Indian history. In this respect, material prosperity provides a society or an individual with the opportunity for spiritual uplift, but at the same time causes a society or an individual to fail into mental devastation or hedonism. In fact, material prosperity is very dangerous for a society, for an individual. Here, we need to think about for a moment about the meaning of the word dangerous. To be dangerous is not to mean escape, but to be careful. As the saying goes that where there is danger, salvation also grows together. Material prosperity is very dangerous, but only through it, materiality can be detoxified. As we have seen so far, the integration of matter and spirit in Indian culture is a dynamic process of realizing spirituality by detoxifying materiality. But what what is realized at the highest of this process is not the simply spirituality, but a third and ultimate dimension that transcends both materiality and spirituality. What we seek through material life is spirituality, but ultimately where we reach its peak is not spirituality itself. I don't know now my respected professor, but understanding maybe, I don't know. Just this is my personal experience and personal understanding.
No, yours is a scholarly presentation.
Okay,
And,
sir.
you are well steeped in Indian culture, and you have given a correct understanding of Indian culture. Particularly, the word dangerous, material prosperity is needed, but we have to
Yes.
be very careful so that it should not pervert our mind and lead
But
to
anyway,
this.
I'm very afraid in front
So
of you. So,
no. Thank you very much. And
yes,
you
I'll
can
continue.
you can now summarize. Huh?
Yes, sir. So the integration of matter and spirit is completed in Nirdvandva, free from opposite, where materiality and spirituality eventually disappear at the same time. In fact, it is no exaggeration to say that Nirdvandva is not only an important feature that appears in the process of integrating matter and spirit, but also the core of identity of Indian culture and philosophy as a whole. Western psychologist Carl Jung once mentioned about this concept of Nirdvandva as the biggest shock in his encounter with Indian thought. It was a great shock to him that in Christian tradition, God is usually defined as good. But in Indian culture, Brahman is defined as being out of these two extremes, neither good nor evil. And also a renowned Korean Chinese philosopher once said that Chinese people seem to have misunderstood Indian thought as a way of thinking aimed at moving away from pain, dukkha, and toward happiness, sukha. But as we all know well, the ultimate goal of Indian thought and culture is ananda, which is free from the opposites of pain and happiness. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In fact, I regard Professor Lee as a cultural ambassador of India in East Asia. And so we value your contribution. Thank you very much. Padmaji, now.
Professor Lee, for excellent lecture.
Thank you, sir.
We really enjoyed, no doubt. You are our cultural ambassador, I would say.
I will do it, sir.
Thank you, thank you. Very nice. We really enjoyed.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Shri Pranav Kularji. He is a graduate in English literature, Western philosophy with an MPhil from Hindu College, Delhi University. He is from the 1993 batch of the civil services and has worked in various offices in the central government, in the Ministry of Finance, in the Controller of Auditor General and the Ministry of Culture. Further, he has written extensively on Indian philosophy, on Vedantic thought, especially Advaita, Visishtadvaita, and Buddhist and Jain metaphysics. He is going to speak about the 3 Vedantic blueprints of reality. Sir, I welcome you to make your presentation. Sir, kindly unmute, sir.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, you
Yes,
are
yes.
audible. Welcome. Audible.
Thank you, Padmaji.
Thank you,
Respected Ram Madhavji, although he's not with us perhaps right now. Esteemed Professor Bhatt Sahab, respected Sri Atmananji, and all the esteemed speakers on this conference. Let me congratulate, I think, the Veda Research Institute at the outset for having taken such an initiative on presenting a conference on Indian identity and cultural continuity. I think it's a wonderful initiative. So I think I need to thank Professor Bhatt, whom I have known now for a few years from my ministry days. It's wonderful, sir, to interact with you again here. Since a lot of the preceding speakers have spoken about Indian culture, tradition, heritage, and the Indian ethos, so I thought I'll kind of take you through. I'll take you back into philosophy a little. I loved what Professor Lee just mentioned. There's nothing unspiritual about life in our tradition. Everything is spiritual. So too philosophy. Philosophy, spirituality, religion, they're all inextricably linked with life in India and in our traditions. So I thought, why not delve a little, just a very short presentation into philosophy per se. Because we've had our great acharyas, so I thought I'll focus on just a little on Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhavacharya, because philosophy has not been just an academic discipline for us. I mean, it's part of life. So in the Western philosophy, of course, now is by and large, it's been a scientific study into empirical phenomena. I think for us, it's a search for the meaning of life itself, the meaning of death, what human existence is all about. And somehow all of it in India gets, a kind of integrated into living itself. So Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhava, very basic, without any details, of course, they represent 3 fundamental, speculative positions of Vedantic thought. And they are formulations of their, whatever road maps they've drawn to the absolute. They reflect, if I could use the phrase, the dialectic between, being and becoming, a very Hegelian kind of concept. But I thought it could be used here in Vedanta. Shankara's, of course, monistic Advaita points to one final higher reality in which the entire material dimension of life is subsumed, and the being aspect of existence which one aspires to experience. Ramanuja, of course, we're all familiar with, his Vishisht Advaita holds that this sensory, material aspect of existence. It's a dimension of that higher reality, and it's equally valid. It serves its purpose through a adoration of the absolute. So this existential journey, if I could use that phrase, of becoming, is to be enjoyed as much as the state of being. Madhava, of course, has represented the third fundamental position of Vedanta, which is diametrically opposite, in a way, to Shankara Ramanuja, in contending that, in his Tattvavad, that the metaphysical reality is plural, but the word of duality is independently real of the absolute. So is as real and not just an illusion. I'd like also to say that I took these three acharyas because they've had an enormous influence on not just our thought, but I think they've had an enormous, they've been colossus. They've been influencers of the way of the Hindu way of life, if I could use that phrase for want of a better, phrase. So whereas Shankara and Ramanuja differ only in, assigning the weightage to the word of plurality, Madhava proposed that this word in which we live, the empirical word, is one of two independent identities along with the absolute. Now, how does all of this, get integrated? All of them essentially wrote treatises on the Brahma Sutras of Maharishi Vedvyas. 555 sutras, aphorisms which contain the essence of Vedantic thought. And their deliberations were triggered by this great call of the first sutra itself, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, therefore, the inquiry, Brahman. So, a call to free inquiry, something which Professor Bhatt and the other speakers mentioned too. The kind of freedom, the kind of flexibility, and the kind of free thinking which is informed not only our philosophy, but all of our tradition. Now, all three based their deliberations on the same text, but branched out into different interpretations. Shankara, of course, held a very uncompromising monistic view. Ramanuja posed this theistic, formulation of reality, and Madhava, of course, contended that the word of plurality in which we live is just about as real and not an illusion at all. Adi Shankara, of course, without going into too much of detail, his appeal lay as much in his erudition and in his dialectical skill as in his being this child prodigy. I think he lived for barely 30 years, 33 actually. That's what the tradition says. I think yet he set ablaze this intellectual world of his times. He redefined, revitalized old Upanishadic concepts. I think not just with great rigor, but I think what was important for me, and I think for most of us, with great humility as well. So from the backwaters of Kaladi to Kedar, I think he took on scholars, sages, savants, and in what he believed to be his spiritual mission, engaging them in scholarly debates to establish his viewpoint. I think his discussions, his deliberations, his Shastrarth with Mandan Mishra are too well known, for me to kind of detail out here. Ramanuja, on the contrary, believed that it was his lifelong mission to deconstruct this notion of the absolute as a personal God, from where our devotional traditions begin. I had the privilege of visiting Melkote in Karnataka, where Ramanuja spent, I believe, almost 20 years of his life. There's a small autonomous mission which Professor Bhatt will recognize. There's a national mission for manuscripts which the Ministry of Culture has begun in the last 10 or 15 years. And it was the preservation of these ancient manuscripts. And in Melkote, the persons who got in touch with the previous people and with me as well were descendants of Ramanuja themselves. So I went across to Melkote, and it was simply fascinating, because the mission, the purpose of the mission is to digitize all these manuscripts. I mean, just as you have UNESCO digitizing ancient manuscripts from across the world in their memory of the word register, so you have this mission which is trying hard. I mean, it's not been a great success till now, but I hope that in the years to come, I think the current government will, not only fund it, but I think give it the greater freedom which it requires to kind of digitize and bring together these manuscripts, because a lot of manuscripts lie with families, especially in South India. So to retrieve them and to kind of make them, give it to the government, is in itself a great, it would be a great achievement. So I had this occasion to visit Ramanuja's original place, and the way those people have kept those manuscripts. What of course I think is well known is that I think he drew inspiration from the 12 Alvar poet saints of South India. And tradition has it that Ramanuja himself was inspired to write his interpretation of the Brahma Sutras at the time of the death of his guru, because his attention was drawn to the three folded fingers of the right hand of his guru, which signified the three unfulfilled desires of his guru. One of which was to write an authoritative commentary on the Brahma Sutras. Ramanuja then goes on to write his magnum opus, the Sri Bhashya, in response to his guru's command. Shankara's theory, of course, and of Brahman and Mayavad circumscribed his own Advait position. I mean, since he essentially perceived the word to be nirguna, without attributes, but something which manifests itself with personal attributes. And this Brahman word of Shankara, explained in that very, very famous, it doesn't require repetition, but I'll still risk it, the snake and rope analogy, where the illusion is caused by a rope mistaking a rope for a snake. All the three acharyas, of course, were not only seminal thinkers, I think where I wanted to kind of draw your attention to, they were also great apostles of mystical devotion, from where our bhakti movements have begun. And I think that's where their mass appeal lay, and which is why I kind of chose this topic as well for today, because when we talk of Indian culture, and we talk in a lot of the speakers mentioned nationalism, and those are all political positions. So I thought, why not kind of take you or run you through a bhakti tradition, because that's where most of the mass appeal of our philosophy lies, actually, as opposed to what Western philosophy, which is more intellectual in its nature. Shankara, of course, his outpourings like the Bhaja Govindam, Saundarya Lahari, even today, I think even an average lay person would be able to inform you more about it than all of us. I mean, they were meant, of course, to inspire, to arouse people to their innate divine self, because there's a thin line. I mean, it's such a cliched line, but I'll still repeat it. There's such a thin line between philosophy and spirituality or mysticism in India, that I think the acharyas unfortunately have got slotted into pure philosophy only. And I think from there only, I think there are the other acharyas as well, but our philosophical traditions, I think, alone lie at the heart of whatever we call Indian culture. Ramanuja, of course, again, I mean, just to come back to him for a minute, he visualized the Virat, or the cosmic energy, in human form. I mean, that's where the appeal lies, so that all of us, each the common man could perhaps relate to it. You visualize the Virat as a friend, as a mother, as a disciple, as a soulmate. I think it's easier for the common man to understand that. So that's our tradition, that's our culture. I mean, which makes, I think, each of us, it makes it so accessible I think the common man, that each of us could aspire, to those mystical heights as well. Madhava, of course, sought to see the absolute from a purely Vaishnavite consciousness and seeking liberation in Krishna. I mean, you have these wonderful, I don't know. I was reminded of the Goswamis of Vrindavan, and I was reminded of the Pichwais of the Nath Dwar, tradition. I think more people relate to that as part of our culture and as part of our tradition. So therefore, I just thought I'll run you through, the three great acharyas in a little capsule kind of a form. To just kind of focus on that aspect, and which to me is the foundational aspect, perhaps, of what we call, Indian culture, Indian tradition, Indian heritage, and Indian fountainhead, of spirituality, mysticism, philosophy, whichever way you'd like to call it. So thank you, Bhatsam. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Pranav Khullar, for bringing in three Vedantic acharyas who have nourished Indian culture and from whom Bhakti tradition emerged, because it is the Bhakti tradition which is the basic mode of living Indian life. So your emphasis on Bhakti tradition is really welcome. We thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you, Padmaji.
Thank you, sir.
Over to Padmaji now.
Next, we have Professor Chirapat Prapandavidyaji. He is going to speak about Indian scriptures and cultural continuity. Sir, we request you to present your paper.
Please introduce him. He is from Sri Lanka, from Thailand, and
okay.
He is an erudite scholar of Indian culture and Sanskrit in particular. He has spread Indian culture in Thailand, and he is heading some organizations there which are meant for propagation of Indian culture.
Sir, are you there?
Doesn't seems to be.
He doesn't. Okay, he's not here with us.
Okay.
Sir, so we will go to the next scholar. What do you say, sir? You want? Yes, Professor Anuradha Janalgada.
No, Professor Ratnam is not available, no? Kumar Ratnam?
Kumar Ratnam, no, we could not get in touch with him, sir.
Yes. So, sir, should we go to the next presentation then?
Yeah. If Kumar Ratnam is not available, then we go to the next one.
Yes, I think he has not joined us.
Not joined us. But Prapandavidya also is a very profound scholar. So if you could make it.
Last few days we've been trying to contact him, but for some reason we couldn't do that. So we will probably, he's busy or occupied with something else.
Or we can have him tomorrow.
Yes, if they respond, we will schedule their presentation for tomorrow.
I shall write to him.
Yes, sir. Now I invite Professor Anuradha Janalgadaji. She's going to talk about the philosophical perspective of Indian dance as seen through its various treatises. Professor Anuradhaji is a reputed performer, teacher, and academic of Kuchipudi dance. She is a professor of dance at the University of Hyderabad and contributed immensely to the dance scholarship of Telugu dance forms, especially Kuchipudi. With more than 3 decades of performance and teaching experience, she has, to her credit, 5 books, several academic papers presented in national and international seminars. Her choreographers include Prabhuddha Manimekhela and Apas, an ode to water and chaya. In recognition of her contribution to dance, she has been honored with several prestigious awards, including Aditya Vikram Birla Award. Madam, I invite you to make your presentation.
Namaskar to all of you. Among such great scholars, it looks a bit of a offbeat kind of a theme that I have chosen today. In fact, you were all talking about the philosophy and of Indian culture, and and this is dance is one of the cultural forms which actually is very much in vogue and has a great history of its own in the Indian cultural history. In fact, as you were talking about what the philosophy of India is all about, or Indian culture is all about, I will talk about how dance actually becomes a part and parcel and a vehicle to transmit this kind of a culture, and also give the practitioner or the onlooker this particular experience of rasa and rasanubhava, and how the treatises from time to time on especially dance have focused on the purpose of dance. And what is the purpose of dance? Why do we dance? Is it just merely for entertainment? So actually, I start with Aurobindo. He says that art is basically is to create harmony in life and purify the emotions, and also open a window to the spiritual experience. That's what Aurobindo talks about art as. And we have, especially when you're talking about dance, we have a great tradition of literature on dance available to us. Especially the earliest available one is Natya Shastra, which is dated back to 2nd century. But earlier to that also, we have references to in Panini's Ashtadhyayi that there are Silan and Krisheshwa matas are also there in Natya. Here in Natya Shastra, basically when you're looking at dance is a very, I think, it's not that kind of an broader term like Natya. So I would prefer to refer to it as Natya. Natya is dramaturgy, which includes music, dance, and drama also. In this Natya Shastra, which is the earliest of the available treatises on dance, Bharata talks about this being Panchama Veda, which has drawn its sources from the 4 Vedas. So here the contention, the thing is that, as it is, dance has been given a kind of a status of a Veda, which can actually translate the human emotions and also clearly give the onlooker a kind of an experience of rasa. That's how dance has been viewed as. So apart in Natya, you see both the pure dance, which is more of a kind of an abstract movement patterns, and Abhinaya, that is where we bring forth the idea and show it in such a fashion through the Sthayi Sanchari Bhavas, so that the onlooker can have the Rasanubhava. Okay. So where is this particular nritta used? When you look at Natya Shastra, nritta, the pure dance movement, is used in the Purvarangam. In the Purvaranga, the first part of the stage presentation, wherein dance or pure movement is used to attract the positive energies and to protect the entire Ranga. That is what is the purpose there. How does it happen? Is basically the kind of words, the aksharas that are used, the bija aksharas that are used in it, are all the ones while being chanted create some kind of a vibration, and these vibrations prompt the movement, and through these movements the design and forms come out which attract the positive energies. So here dance, the pure dance on nritta, is becoming a kind of a bridge between that particular positive energy that we are trying to attract, and the idea of connecting to the ultimate truth. So that's what is the purpose that we see when Natya Shastra says that the pure dance nritta should be, Suddha Nrittam should be used in the Purvaranga of Purvaranga when you're presenting a dance presentation or drama as such. When you're talking about this particular aspect, the content, when it comes to Abhinaya, the content of dance is very important. That dance uses, Indian classical dance actually uses a content which is so myriad and varied. We are talking about this, great scholars were all talking about the Bhakti movement, reference has come, and earlier to that, if you have a lot of, to the various stories, I don't call them as myth, I would call them as histories that we had. We have so many stories associated with our mythologies there. But these stories, the Bhagavata Purana or whatever you are taking, the stories, and also especially the compositions of the Bhakti poets and Madhura Bhakti, especially the Madhura Bhakti poets, are the ones which become the content of presentation for dances and continue to be so until today, especially pertaining to Indian classical dance. But when you look at the tradition as such, the Natya Shastra says that there is no jnana, na tat jnanam, na tat shilpam, nasa vidya, nasa kala, nasa yogo, nasa karma, natyasmin na drishyate. Dance has such a wide, Natya has such a wide this thing that you can't see any other knowledge which is not being included into dance, is what Natya Shastra says. So coming from Natya Shastra, you have these are, Natya Shastra, I take it as a representative of the treatises that have come in the ancient Indian early period. And then in the medieval period, you see several other texts talking about dance and music together as Sangeeta. So when you talk about Sangeeta Ratnakara, or even the later work Sangeeta Darpana of Damodara, these works actually talk about the purpose of dance. What is the purpose of dance or music? Sangeeta, they talk about the purpose of dance. Why do we dance? In Natya Shastra, it says Kridaniyakam Ichhamo. It is basically to give kind of a entertainment to the onlooker, and also give some heavily loaded knowledge to the onlooker in a very easy fashion, and also for to take away the dukkha and shama. That's what this says. That's how dance is looked at. But when it comes to the medieval period, especially around the 12th and later that particular period, you see that Natya, the Sangeeta works. Natya is a part and dance is a part and parts of the Sangeeta. Trayam is, you have Nrittam, Vadyam and Geetam are all Sangeeta, come under Sangeeta. So there are certain works like Sangeeta Ratnakara and Sangeeta Darpana that talks about the purpose of dance. Here the purpose of dance, as we see, is that they say that, they talk about Sarira Vivechana and also Pindotpatti Krama. What does it mean? It says that there is a subtle body inside the body, and it actually also has the presence of Kundalini Shakti. So this particular subtle body that we are talking about is embedded when the Pinda itself takes its origins in the womb. So this particular subtle body and the primordial, the presence of primordial power, that is Kundalini, which awakens that the Shat Chakras is present. And when these Shat Chakras are awakened, and when the Sahasrara is awakened, there is a flow of pure joy into the human body. So when that pure joy flows into the body, it also nourishes the soul, or the body and the soul as such. And this particular thing, this particular pure flow of pure energy or pure joy into the body is the one that leads to attainment of bliss, that is moksha, supreme bliss. That's what is moksha. And they say that Sangeeta, the nada, and the movement that is associated with it when you dance, all these are the ones which are actually instruments that facilitates this kind of a flow of positive energy into you, and then also gives a kind of a supreme bliss which is akin to the moksha. It's almost like experiencing this kind of a moksha. So this is very interesting for me, because when you see dance being used as a ritual, of course post Bharata period, from Guptas, the Agama Shastras are there, according to which dance was used as a part of the ritual of the Ranga Bhoga, and also as a part of worship in the temples. Here, by the medieval period, some of the text talks about this kind of the process through which art can help you to transcend or gain that pure energy and pure bliss as such. So this Sarira Viveka and Pindotpati are seen actually are seen in still being done in some of the dance forms, especially dance theatre forms, the traditional theatre forms. And I refer here to Kuchipudi, one of the forms, wherein Golla Kalapam, there is a Kalapam called the Golla Kalapam, where the Gollabhama is a cowherdess, is in dialogue with the learned Brahmin, who challenges the then existing system of caste system and and the ritual and all that. This is probably in the wake of the social reform movement that was happening, and questioning of the society was happening. In that Golla Kalapa, she talks about this particular Sukshma Sarira and talks about Atma Yajna as being a supreme thing, rather than doing ritual outside, which is outwardly and materialistic. So this kind of reflection of that particular time and society are also seen contributing to this kind of a thinking of how the awakening of the Sukshma Sharira happens, and how a dancer, or through dance, one can attain pure joy. And from this onwards, when you look at the symbolism of Shiva, when you look at this, you have several physicists talking about it, especially the Tao of physics talks about it, the Shiva being the basis of existence, where according to modern physicists and the quantum field theory, Shiva's dance is the dance of subatomic matter, where because I'm reminded of Professor Bhattji talking about the science and the wedding between science and the spirituality happening. And I think this kind of analysis of the Shiva's dance itself is an example that we have a kind of a wedding that is happening between these two, right? I mean, for ages together, and we are now trying to go back and rediscover and relook at all these things. He actually says that this subatomic particles in this, there is always a movement that is going on, and they follow this cosmic cycle of Srishti Sthiti, Laya, and then Tirobhava and Anugraha. All these are the ones that are symbolized in the dance of Shiva. So this kind of in dance, when you look at dance and the movement being the basis here, that it is very interesting that this kind of interpretations do come in, and there is a lot of today we look at dance only as something that which gives kind of an entertainment. But the thing is, there is a lot of inner meaning and philosophy, and a lot of work has happened during the medieval periods and in the early periods, and also in the modern period. Also, there are a lot of works talking about the science of dance and why do you dance. But we as dancers, what happens is, try to only look at just when you talk about Natya Shastra, only the kind of Angikabhinaya that it talks about, but not go beyond that. And now dance has been very relegated or compressed to being a kind of a mere entertainment. If everything shuts, it is dance that would be the first casualty there, because we still feel that dance is mere a kind of not as a vehicle through which one can elevate oneself as a human, spiritually and spiritually, but as something which is very merely entertaining. So these are some of the thoughts that I would like to put together, and also talk about how a dancer, I being a dancer, what does dance give to me? Is it just that bodily physical labor that I do by practicing and trying to make myself perfect in a particular technique, or trying to express the ideas that are being embedded in the lyrics that I take, or is it beyond that? That's what this has been a question that has been coming forth back and forth to us as dancers. So I would say, Tagore talks about dance giving a kind of a freedom of what? Freedom of spirit. And once you dance, what happens is it gives a kind of a spirit to the dance. Freedom, a feeling of being not bonded to something, being tied to something, a kind of liberation that comes into us physically as well as mentally once you dance. So that's what is the major gain, and that the dancer herself has when she or he dances, dances and gets into a particular state of mind wherein there is a kind of a freedom that comes, that flows into you as such. And Tagore also talks about, he speaks about that art is not a utility at all. It has a purpose. The purpose is to give this kind of a freedom to the dancer and a pleasure to the onlooker. And also it is a medium through which, through a playful manner, very heavily loaded philosophies can be very easily given to the layperson in a palatable manner. That's what is the purpose of dance and continues to be the purpose of dance. In fact, when I was talking to Tulsi ji, she was Padmaji, she said that I said, I don't know where I fit into this particular presentation of, the great philosophies are being talked about, Indian dance philosophy, Indian cultural philosophy is talked about. She says that, she was talking about, why don't you show a small clipping of, where some kind of, this kind of the points that you talked about, the purpose of dance. It's not just spiritual elevation, but it also is to propagate dharma, is what is very important. That's what has been the purpose of dance as such. To show one clipping, I would finish off with showing a clipping. This particular clipping is from a work called Prabuddha Manimekala. Manimekala is Chatanar's work. It's a very well-known, Professor Bhaji would know much about that. This work actually talks about the daughter of our Madhavi, Manimekala, her name is. Here, actually, Manimekala goes to Manipravala Dvipa, where she has the revelation of Buddha. So there she talks about the Ashta, she talks about the Ashtangika Marga, where there is the, she talks about Samma Sankappa, Samma Ditti, Samma Vacha, that is, right, correct view, correct intention. These are the Ashtangika margas through which, the qualities through which you can become a better human being as such. So this is particular clipping shows, she's in awe of that particular island, and she's talking about how this kind of revelations do come to her once she has put her foot on that Manipravala Dvipa. And that's where she actually realizes that her purpose in life is different. So this particular clipping, which is a 4-minute clipping that I would show, talks about this Ashtangika Marga of correct view, correct intention, correct speech, correct action, correct livelihood, correct effort, correct mindfulness, and single-mindedness. These are the 8-fold path that talks about the ways of being a better human being. So I would conclude with this particular clipping. Shall I share the screen, Ushaji, now?
Yes, ma'am. You have been as a co-host, so you can share the screen.
Thank you.
You can see the option to share the screen, the green button.
I'm doing that.
Okay.
Sir, Professor Bachi,
Please.
yes, you were
Yes.
on mute.
So I would like to thank Madam Anuradha ji. Among the multiple manifestations of human consciousness, dance occupies a very important position in Indian cultural tradition, and therefore your contribution is appreciated. We once again thank you very much. Any other speaker is there?
Professor, this is actually the last presentation for this first session, sir. But Professor Daveji wants to add something, sir.
Can I say one or two things?
Okay.
About
okay, most welcome.
Anuradha ji said, about the purpose of the dance. Kalidas says, Natyam binna ruchehe janasya api ekam samaradhanam. Is only one way, which can give entertainment to different kind of people with different tastes. And about the, you said about the dance is like, the movements of the subatomic particle. And in Shiva Tandav Sutra, we have Jata, Kata, Hasam, Brahman, Nilim, Panirjari, Vilolavi, Chivallari, Virajamana Murdani, Dagat, Jwalal, Larat, Patta Pavake, Kishore Chandra Shekhare, Ratik Patikshanam Mama. This is dance, word, results into dance and the actions giving entertainment to all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Constitutes the very heart of reality and also heart of our own existence. So whole life is a dance.
Yes, sir. So
let me
with
thank,
this,
let me thank all the scholars here for having given me this opportunity, and especially Padmaji, and because unless, I mean, she was the one who I was a bit doubtful about this particular presentation, but she said, no, it will give a different kind of a dimension. I said, I don't know much philosophy or anything, but she said, it's going to give a different dimension. Let us also, because it's a part of culture that we have done. Thanks to her and the trust and everybody for having been here to
It's a part of our culture and also a part of philosophy. Because the ultimate goal of philosophy is realization of Ananda, Satchit Ananda. And one of the purposes of dance is yielding joy. Raso ways, some way one on the. So rasa is the ultimate samambonam of our life, and dance is one of the most efficacious medium for that. So your presentation was therefore very much in line with our program. Thank you very much.
thank you, everyone. Namaste. And with this, we come to the end of the first session for day 1. And the second session starts at 5 p.m. And we hope that you all join us again. Namaste.
Will you please tell about the second session program? Who will be speaking?
One second, sir, I'll tell you. First, we have Sunita Sen Gupta ji, and then Professor Karamtej Singh ji, then Vedika Hardoel ji, then Shankar Tatwavadi ji, and then we have also Professor Dave ji and Professor Ramarao Pappu ji, then Dr. Kalacharya, then Dr. Partha Srinivasan, and then Dr. Subhashri Mishra ji. These scholars will be presenting their papers in the evening, sir.
Please contact them also well in advance, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are thankful to you. Now you have conducted it very well. So you are a very good coordinator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, with your guidance.
Padmaji, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Daveji, thank you, sir. Bhaji, thank you, sir.
And Usha ji has done also a very wonderful job in supporting us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Bhagwan is here.
It is very well done, actually. I'm so happy. And the quality of presentation is so high, so deep. Really, I feel it was one of the most successful. We're having one of the most successful and the most productive webinar. So I hope we'll having the other presenters also will be equally of this high standard. But
We
they
have
have set
very
the
eminent.
tone at the right tone.
Now we have very eminent scholars to
Yes.
participate in the other programs, and with your blessings, well begun is half done.
Yes.
So we have been quite successful in our deliberations, and deliberations were very rich and sublime, both.
Yes.
And this Mata Anuradha ji, what she did actually, it is beyond words I can't express. As far as this knowledge on dance, actually, we did not have so much of knowledge actually that dance. We only know that dances are performed in heaven for God. So until one reaches there, that God consciousness, one cannot really appreciate and see through this media. But the way she explained it, it is so unique. So I'm very feeling blessed.
In fact, every scholar made some rich contribution.
Yes,
And,
every scholar. And this Pranab Khilarji, my lord, the way he integrated the three acharyas. It's very difficult actually to have an integrated view of the three great systems of Indian philosophy in such a short time. That shows his depth of conceptual clarity and understanding. I'm really amazed.
He deserves the position of Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Culture.
Oh, that's the
Yes.
reason. So we have the befitting person, the fittest person to be in the Ministry of Culture, actually.
Thanks to your
My
blessings,
old friend.
Swamiji.
He is
And
my
thanks
old
to
friend.
WhatsApp's blessings.
I think, Bharji, each of these paper that is presented here, it needs to be compiled and a book should be published, actually. I'm feeling so glad. And the professor from Korea, what he said also. So this
You
webinar,
are very,
yes,
very scholarly presentation.
very, very scholarly.
Professor Lee
Everyone,
is well
yes,
steeped in, he's
yes,
well steeped in Indian culture. Though he is
yes.
a foreigner, but he says that he is half Indian.
Actually, he is really, you have said, he is the India's cultural ambassador
Yeah.
in the East Asia. And
Yeah.
Dr. Malhotra ji also, his talk was very, very
Malhotra also is a
illuminating.
good scholar. Yeah.
Yes. So, very good. It is a very good theme. Only Bharji can think of such a beautiful theme.
Everyone is eminent in one's own field. So we have
Yes.
gathered some eminent scholars.
Yes. So we look forward to the second session that will start at 7 o'clock. We have many scholars from abroad. So that's why perhaps at this time, it will be daytime for them and they will be able to participate.
Bhagwan, it starts at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, not 7.
5 o'clock.
Five
But by the
o'clock,
time you go to Subhasri, Dr. Subhasri Mishra, Partha Srinivasan, they are all in America.
Yes, they said
Yes.
by their presentations are scheduled towards the end so that it can be convenient for them.
Yes,
as
yes, yes.
Ramarao Pappu also is from America. So
Yes.
he also should be
It's
at the
also
end.
in USA.
Yes, I was in touch with him and I scheduled his program according to his convenience.
Fine. Okay then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, please. We see all of us will live together again in the evening.
Yeah.
Yes.
With your blessings, sir, we have begun well and we will end well also.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Shall I end?